Hello everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Ian Explains. Ian Explains is a segment we put on where an EN engineering expert helps dissect a specific utility topic and make it easier for us to understand. This week is part 4 in our 5-part series on electrification. We have with us Mike Glenn. Now Mike is the Director of Business Development for our Electric Utilities Consulting Group. He's going to be talking with us about electrification and how it's going to affect the grid and steps that utilities can take to get ahead of this. Mike, how are you this week?
I'm great, Tom. How about yourself, my man?
Doing really well, really well. So Mike, let's jump right in. How will electrification affect the grid?
It's a great question, Don. We see this across the board right now with a lot of utilities on how they handle electrification from vehicles to fuel sources and everything in between. And one of the big areas that we see it affecting the grid and our customers see it affecting their own customers is with the adoption rate associated with electrification, as well as the accessibility from the utilities perspective to understanding what is behind the meters at their consumers' homes, so that they can properly forecast it and then make sure that they have the infrastructure in place in order to support it.
Got it, Mike. So what are some things that utilities can do to ready themselves for electrification?
Yeah, that's another great question, Don. As we kind of discussed earlier in some of the earlier EN Explained sections associated with electrification, the overall outcome of electrification could have a tremendous burden on the electric infrastructure as we know it today. So some of the things that utilities can do to kind of get ahead of that is develop a streamlined process for their customers to be able to register devices that they might have behind the grid, such as electric charging or heat pumps or battery storage type systems, and then even rooftop solar and a couple of other things associated with what we consider kind of behind the meter, off the grid type solutions now. And what this will do for the utilities is it'll give them a lens into what their consumers have at their, on their own properties and at their disposal. So then what they can do from there is, through that lens, understand areas of high adoption where they could have congestion in the future and figure out how to address those problems prior to them actually becoming a complication on the system.
So how does this affect the average electricity consumer?
So if I'm a consumer with an electric vehicle and I come home from work every day and I plug in my car along with all of my neighbors on my street, that could potentially put a burden on the utility itself. And what utilities are starting to put in place now, and what should become more of a streamlined process with their local regulators and state infrastructures, is going to be to have some time of use associated with it to help flatten that demand a little bit more, where if I need my vehicle now, I should be always able to charge that vehicle, but I might pay a premium for it. But if I don't need that vehicle right now, I can have a time of use rate associated with it, so then when I plug it in, it might not charge it until 2 o'clock in the morning, as long as I have enough juice to get to work the next day.
And finally, Mike, what services can EN Engineering provide to help utilities with this?
We can support utilities in the very, very beginning stages associated with their upfront planning and procedure development, all the way through the actual implementation of charging units that might be available to the public. One of the things that we can do looking at that initial planning phase would be working with utilities on how do they handle adoption, looking at feeders that might have some of those congestion issues that we had discussed a little earlier, and how to address those problems. So basically anything from the upfront consulting all the way through the implementation of these projects, we can support.
So Mike, thanks a lot for joining us today. For those of you watching online, please feel free to share or comment in order to be entered into a contest to win a gift card. Mike, thanks again for walking us through electrification. Have a great and safe week.
Thank you so much, Don. Appreciate it.